Pam Bondi walked to the podium with no script, and dropped a bomb. A sitting federal judge rigged deportation rulings. What she revealed next? Sealed files, secret messages, and total collapse. It didn't feel like politics. Not at first. Pam Bondi walked to the podium in Greystone with no prepared remarks, no aides flanking her, no slogan backdrop. Only a sealed folder in her hands and the weight of what she was about to say tightening every muscle in her shoulders. The Department of Justice had given her the space but not the blessing. It was a concession. Not support. She didn't flinch. This is not political. This is about trust. No one expected more than that at first. 6 clipped words. But within minutes, every major news network had cut to the feed. Cable hosts whispered guesses in real time. Political Twitter reloaded by the second. And then, in the second minute, she said his name. Judge James Boasberg. For most Americans, it meant nothing. But for those watching from inside D.C., it was a thunderclap. Boasberg had presided over high-security immigration cases, visa requests, classified dockets. A federal judge. Georgetown. Yale. Obama appointed. Beyond reproach, or so it was thought. Bondi accused him of sabotaging justice. Judge Boasberg has knowingly interfered with deportation rulings, sealed critical evidence, and misused his bench to protect political allies. The room didn't exhale. Reporters didn't ask questions. Phones lit up like flares. She kept going. There is no ruling. No written order. Just a phone call to stop 5 deportations. No paperwork. No process. No law. And when IC moved forward anyway, because there was nothing to hold them back, Boasberg threatened contempt. Not as a judge, but as an enforcer of silence. That's when the whispers inside the department changed. What had once been chalked up to procedural confusion began to look like a pattern. Memos misdated. Internal emails sent through encrypted messaging apps. Evidence, pending classification, that stayed that way indefinitely. Pam held up the folder. She didn't open it. But she said what it contained: signal logs, metadata, private messages, and one calendar entry that contradicted sworn testimony. Then, the sentence that snapped the country awake. Judge Boasberg didn't delay justice, he distorted it. Inside DOJ, people turned off their phones. Federal attorneys closed office doors. And outside, on the courthouse steps in D.C., protesters started gathering before nightfall. Bondi had thrown a match into a sealed room. And she wasn't reaching for water. 48 hours after the press conference, a signal message leaked. JB says we'll bury it in pretrial. No panic. No attribution. No context. Just the kind of phrase that flickers like gasoline across a dry landscape. Within minutes, the hashtag SignalGate was trending on every platform. Screenshots surfaced. Threads dissected encryption logs. Every major law podcast scrambled emergency episodes. No one needed to ask who JB was. Pam Bondi had already said it aloud. Judge James Boasberg. The message was real, sent from a former DOJ staffer to a current legal aide just weeks before Boasberg quietly took over the deportation case. The same case IC had been barred from enforcing because of a ruling that, on paper, didn't exist. The message didn't leak from Bondi's office. But no one believed it was accidental. And she didn't deny it. Instead, her office released a single sentence. We're reviewing all relevant communications as part of an internal accountability process. Translation: keep watching. Behind closed doors, the department scrambled. Subpoenas went out. Access logs were reviewed. A forensic team started matching phone records to sealed court schedules. None of it lined up. Some hearings had been rescheduled without notice. Others were marked, pending review, for over a year. Evidence meant for open court had been quietly rerouted into private chambers. Even court reporters weren't always present. One clerk, contacted anonymously by a mid-level investigator, said the quiet part out loud. Nothing ever landed on paper unless he wanted it to. Meanwhile, a second message surfaced, this one older, sent weeks before Boasberg even had jurisdiction. They're planning to dump some of it in late March. Don't worry, Jay, I've got it covered. Pam read that message twice. She knew what it meant. The case didn't land in Boasberg's court by chance. It was steered there, manipulated internally, assigned strategically. One of her aides asked if they should go public with it. She shook her head. Not yet. Let them build the denial first. But then the Wall Street Journal got wind. They clipped a sentence from Pam's closed-door briefing and ran it above the fold. He chose his loyalties. By noon, it was printed on mugs. And by nightfall, the country wasn't debating Pam Bondi anymore. They were asking one question over and over. How many other rulings had been buried this way? And the system, built on quiet procedures and trust in the robe, had no answer ready. The backlash came hard and fast. Legal scholars lined up on cable news to denounce Bondi's move. A Yale professor shook his head on MSNBC and called it a constitutional crisis manufactured for headlines. One watchdog group called it a dangerous assault on judicial independence. The narrative was shifting, at least professionally. But online, something else was happening. Because while op-eds lectured about process, Pam Bondi's team was sifting through metadata. What they found wasn't conspiracy. It was coordination. A log entry from Boasberg's former clerk read, "Keep this one in my courtroom. Too risky for another judge." That line didn't make headlines at first. But inside the DOJ, it confirmed what Pam had suspected. The manipulation wasn't ideological. It was operational. Strategic courtroom assignments. Deliberate silence. And message after message sent off the official grid. No paper trail. Use Signal. That line became the rallying cry. Because it said what nothing else had, this wasn't negligence. It was intent. Pam took it straight to the deputy counsel. The conversation lasted 9 minutes. No shouting. No threats. They told her it was dangerous. That undermining judicial credibility during an election cycle would cause chaos. That public faith was fragile. She didn't raise her voice. Just stared across the room and said, "If public faith depends on covering this up, maybe it should crumble." They didn't respond. By the next morning, protesters were outside federal courthouses in 4 cities. The signs were simple. No more shadow justice. Truth doesn't get sealed. The pressure wasn't national yet. But it was creeping, city by city, docket by docket. And then came a whisper from someone no one expected, a former courtroom translator. No interviews, no spotlight. Just a tick-tock with 60 seconds of quiet authority. "I watched immigration cases get reassigned to Boasberg like clockwork. Like someone upstairs wanted it that way." It wasn't a bombshell. But it was something else, credible. And it traveled faster than any editorial ever could. Inside Boasberg's chambers, the lights stayed on late. But the judge himself said nothing. No interviews. No written denials. Just one line from his clerk. "Judge Boasberg will respond through the appropriate legal channels." That sentence collapsed within 12 hours. Because by then, Bondi had started opening the folder. Sunday night. Prime time. Pam Bondi sat across from Dana Kessler, the one journalist no one accused of grandstanding. The set was bare. No music. No pundits. Just 2 women and a single sealed folder. Dana's opening line was brief. "Tonight, we're showing the documents Pam Bondi says prove Judge Boasberg obstructed justice. Viewer discretion is advised." Bondi didn't blink. She opened the folder. Page 1, a Signal message, timestamped 2 months before Boasberg took the SignalGate case. "Can we confirm JB will take it? We need someone who understands the stakes." The contact was verified. The initials matched. The timing aligned with internal reassignment memos. Dana raised her eyebrow. "You believe that's Boasberg?" Pam nodded. "We don't believe. We know." Page 2, an internal memo, never filed publicly, between 2 court clerks. The language was cautious, but clear. "Coordinate with JB. He'll make the call from chambers. No formal order needed." Dana looked up. "This bypasses standard court procedure." Pam didn't soften. "He didn't bypass it. He redefined it." Page 3, an email. Addressed to Boasberg. Subject: friendly reminder. Delay discovery until May. They'll be out of office by then. The sender? A policy advisor tied to 2 previous administrations. Behind them, a red banner flashed across the screen. Breaking: email suggests federal judge coordinated case timing for political cover. That clip hit 12 million views in 4 hours. The DOJ issued a tight-lipped statement before midnight. "We take these allegations seriously and are reviewing the newly surfaced materials." It wasn't a denial. It wasn't even a deflection. It was something rarer: submission to momentum. Boasberg, on the other hand, said nothing. But silence had become its own kind of confession. By morning, his chambers were shuttered. Hearings rescheduled. Aid access restricted. One staffer was photographed slipping sealed folders into a waiting black SUV. No markings. No insignia. And then, the letters started coming. From paralegals. Immigration officers. A retired federal clerk in New Mexico. In 2017, I watched Boasberg override another judge on an immigration hold. The man was released. 2 months later, he killed a sheriff's deputy. Pam didn't release the letter. She just folded it and slid it into her desk. Because now, this wasn't about sealed documents. This was about what happened when people died, and no one answered for it. On a panel that night, a former circuit judge said, "Pam Bondi is trying to burn down the judiciary." She heard it. Then told her staff quietly, "I'm not burning it down. I'm ripping off the tarp. If there's rot, it's not my fault for showing it." Outside, the country waited. And for the first time in his career, Judge James Boasberg had no ruling, no defense, and no robe thick enough to shield him. It took 3 weeks. 3 weeks of legal stalling, disappearing files, and televised speculation. 3 weeks of silence from Judge Boasberg and carefully worded statements from DOJ spokespeople who looked increasingly uneasy. Then, on a Wednesday morning, the headline hit like a detonator. Federal Judge James Boasberg to appear in court this Friday. No commentary. No press quotes. Just a time, a location, and a name. Pam Bondi read it, closed her laptop, and said aloud, more to herself than her staff, "Good. He's not hiding behind clerks anymore." Ashridge, Virginia. A quiet courthouse tucked into a government corridor. No marble steps. No TV trucks parked outside. But by sunrise there were protesters. Signs. Former ICE officers. Immigrant families. Even a handful of federal clerks who'd taken personal leave. No more shadow justice. Accountability has no robe. Boasberg didn't use the public entrance. Marshals guided him through a side hallway. One blurry photo caught him mid-step, navy suit, silver tie, face locked and unreadable. The man who once ruled over national security dockets now couldn't enter a courtroom without armed escort. Inside, the charges were read. No ceremony. No delay. Obstruction of justice. Misuse of judicial authority. Failure to recuse from conflict of interest cases. Willful concealment of evidence. He pled not guilty. No emotion. No eye contact. Just 4 words, delivered like glass on concrete. Pam Bondi wasn't in the room. She was across the street, sitting quietly in a nondescript law office, watching the feed from a private monitor. The judge presiding over the arraignment said nothing personal. He read the bail terms, set the hearing schedule, and banged the gavel once. No debate. No editorial. Just law. But outside the courtroom, the real trial had already started. Pam's inbox had become a floodplain, court clerks from other districts, border patrol officers, pro bono lawyers. Most had no smoking gun. Just moments. Rulings that felt off. Hearings sealed with no clear justification. Discovery delayed for months, then quietly closed. One former DOJ assistant, face blurred, voice disguised, spoke to a cable outlet. "We were told to reroute filings. To delay. To trust Boasberg. We knew what that meant. Delay meant bury." The clip ran between commercial breaks all weekend. Boasberg's lawyers issued one sentence to the media. "Judge Boasberg has always served with honor. He looks forward to clearing his name." But something had shifted. Because this wasn't just about one judge anymore. It was about the architecture. Pam hadn't uncovered a single bad actor. She'd exposed the way a robe, a calendar, and an encrypted app could bend the system without ever breaking it. And now, the question on everyone's lips wasn't whether Boasberg was guilty. It was, who else had the key? Pam Bondi expected pressure. What she didn't expect was betrayal from inside her own team. The day after Boasberg's arraignment, the DOJ confirmed what had once seemed unthinkable. He would face both a federal criminal trial and a full ethics tribunal. It was unprecedented. Judges didn't go on trial, not like this. Pam didn't celebrate. Because by then, something had shifted. Small delays. Odd hesitations in her team's workflow. A redacted document request that wasn't redacted when they'd first pulled it. Then a letter arrived, formal, stamped, and internal. The Office of Professional Responsibility was requesting Pam's appearance for potential misconduct. She stared at the letter for a full minute. Not out of shock. Out of calculation. Then she looked at the signature. Logan Brantley. Her former legal advisor. The one who sat beside her during the first SignalGate briefing. The one who whispered, "We can't ignore this." Now, he was accusing her of overreach, of partisanship, of compromising the DOJ's neutrality. It wasn't subtle. It wasn't even strategic. It was message warfare. And it was meant to isolate her. She called a closed-door meeting. Core team only. No phones. No aides. No notes. "They're not trying to defend Boasberg," she said quietly. "They're trying to erase the structure he exposed, by making me the story." Her chief investigator looked up. "Do we think Brantley was working with Boasberg?" "No," she said. "Worse. He's working to protect the rest." Because that was the real fear now. That Boasberg wasn't the center of the rot, just the crack that revealed the wall. Encrypted logs had already shown fragments, internal names, third-party messaging aliases. Most were code-named. But a few were sloppy. One read, "Talk to Brantley. He says she won't push." She had pushed. Harder than they expected. Now they were pushing back. That weekend, the Washington Post ran a column. "Pam Bondi may have violated DOJ protocols in Boasberg investigation." It cited anonymous officials. Raised concerns. Asked vague, damaging questions. No proof. Just implication. Pam's office issued one line. "If asking hard questions is misconduct, we're in worse shape than I thought." But privately, she was quiet. Controlled. And absolutely furious. That night, she sat in her office rereading a letter from Harbor Point. A mother. Her son, an IC agent, paralyzed during a 2019 op linked to one of the deportation cases Boasberg had blocked. The letter ended with, "Don't stop. They don't expect people like us to fight back." Pam folded the page once, twice, then slid it into her drawer. Then she gave the order, released the full message log. Unredacted. Time-stamped. Verified. Every signal message. Every court memo. Every quiet reference to Boasberg, to Brantley, to calendar shifts and chamber meetings that bypassed legal protocol. The media storm was instant. Cable networks scrolled the messages like ticker tape. Twitter flooded with the new hashtag #WhoElseKnew. And Logan Brantley? He resigned the next morning. No press conference. No defense. Just a quiet email to HR, and silence. Pam didn't gloat. She didn't post. She just stepped back into the camera one last time before the final hearing and said, "They tried to make this about me. Now let's make it about them." Because the verdict was coming. And so was something even bigger. There was no drama. No gasps. No shouting. Just the thud of a wooden gavel and the sterile silence that follows real consequence. "Guilty on 2 counts," the judge read. "Willful concealment of evidence. Misuse of judicial authority." Judge James Boasberg stood still. He didn't blink. He didn't speak. His expression was fixed in the shape of a man who had never been publicly contradicted, until now. No prison time. But total disbarment. A lifetime ban from judicial service. Immediate removal from the bench. No appeals. No final words. Just a robe folded and handed to a clerk. Outside, the crowd didn't cheer. They didn't need to. The internet exploded first. #Justice Wears No Robe trended within minutes. So did #SignalGate finale and #Bondi was right. But Pam Bondi didn't go on TV. She didn't even walk out the front entrance. She'd chosen the back row of the courtroom. No cameras. No escort. Just her and the sound of power unraveling under its own weight. Because this wasn't vindication. It was a beginning. A few reporters caught her on the courthouse steps. One shouted, "What do you say to critics who called this political?" She stopped. No staffers. No lawyer beside her. Just her voice. "I say power only fears one thing, truth with a microphone. And today, truth spoke louder than the bench." That clip was viewed 22 million times in 2 days. But it wasn't the clip that mattered. It was what happened after. Within a week, the Judicial Review Board announced a national audit of sealed dockets and chamber rulings. A quiet review process began across circuits, spanning everything from immigration to visa courts. A new protocol was drafted for anonymous reporting, digital, traceable, transparent. Whispers turned into policy. Letters flooded Pam's office. Hundreds. From Boston clerks. Seat of you mothers. Red Mesa ICE agents. Most of them said the same thing. Thank you? We thought nobody saw. But the one that stopped her came in a child's handwriting. Crayons. Uneven lines. It was from Oakvale. A drawing of a cross. And a courtroom scale. The note read, "Thank you for being brave. I want to be a lawyer like you." Pam held it quietly for a long time. She didn't cry. She just smiled, and whispered one word. One. Because that's how it started. Not with a scandal. Not with ambition. Just one judge. One sealed case. One voice willing to speak when no one else would. Pam Bondi never ran for office again. She never held another title. But the story didn't fade. It was taught in law schools. Reared every anniversary. Cited in hearings. And somewhere, in courtrooms across the country, judges remembered. They remembered what happened when one woman stepped to a podium, opened no folder and said, "Not this time." And for the rest of us? We stopped believing the system could fix itself. Because sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it takes someone with a cross around her neck and fire in her chest.